I didn't know the number was bait until I saw how calmly they said it. $5,000. Not 50,000. Not $250,000. 5,000. Small enough to sound believable. Clean enough to fit on one page. Ugly enough to stain a name fast. 2 hours earlier, I'd been in a training room with stale coffee and folding chairs, while my director shook my hand like I was getting a medal. Michael carried this rollout, Evan Reed said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 120 hours. Nights, weekends, whatever it took. People clapped. A couple of supervisors even nodded at me like I'd saved them from drowning. I remember thinking for a second that maybe the sacrifice had actually registered, that maybe this place still rewarded the people who held it together. Then I walked back to my desk and saw 2 security guards standing there, already holding a small cardboard box. One of them said my name like a question. Michael? I stood up slowly because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. My monitor was still open to the final training roster. Names, completion dates, notes about who needed extra help. The kind of detail nobody notices until it's missing. The taller guard didn't look at my screen. He looked past me like he'd been taught not to see people in moments like this. HR needs you, he said. Now. I asked the obvious question. What's going on? He didn't answer that. He just repeated, now. The walk to HR felt longer than it should have. Every badge door that opened for me felt like it was opening for the last time. We passed people I'd trained, people I'd stayed late for, people who suddenly found something very interesting on their phones. HR's conference room was cold in that way modern offices try to call clean. Marla, the HR manager, was already seated. Beside her sat a man I'd never met. Plain suit, no smile. The kind of posture that says security without the uniform. Marla gestured to the chair across from her. It wasn't an invitation. It was placement. We're going to keep this brief, she said, like she was doing me a favor. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. At the top was my employee ID. Under it, a list of purchases, gift cards. Each line item clipped and neat. At the bottom, in bold, the total, $5,000. Marla folded her hands. We have reason to believe you stole company funds. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. Like my brain refused to accept that sentence from a person who'd emailed me thank you notes during the rollout. What? I said, and it came out quiet, not because I was scared, because I was stunned. The man beside her finally spoke. Loss prevention, he said, like his title was supposed to replace his name. These transactions were made under your credentials. They're training incentives, I said, already flipping into explanation mode because that's what I'd been trained to do. Solve, clarify, fix. Completion cards, attendance rosters. I have sign-offs. Marla's expression didn't move. We've reviewed the matter. I stared at her. Reviewed what? Who said they weren't distributed? Loss prevention leaned forward. You can explain later. Right now we need your phone. That was the first moment the room changed, because asking for my phone wasn't about $5,000. It was about control. It was about cutting me off from whatever proof I had before I could even remember where it lived. No, I said automatically. Then I caught myself and corrected it, forcing my voice steady. I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm asking why. Do you have a warrant? A policy? Anything? Marla's tone stayed smooth. If you don't comply, we will document that you refuse to participate in the investigation. Investigation. They hadn't asked a single real question. They hadn't asked who approved the purchases. They hadn't asked where the cards were handed out. They hadn't asked why a training lead would risk his career for a number that small. They just had a paper and a script. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of speed up. That's what happens when you realize you're not in a misunderstanding. You're in a setup. I slid the paper back toward Marla. This is insane, I said. Evan told me to run those purchases through my account because procurement was too slow. I have the messages. Marla blinked once. Your director is not part of this meeting. That doesn't make sense, I said. He literally praised me this morning. Loss. Prevention's eyes flicked. Just for a second, like he was annoyed I kept reaching for logic. Phone, he said again, firmer. I looked at Marla and waited for her to meet my eyes like a human being. She didn't, so I handed it over because I understood the next move. If I resisted, I'd become combative. If I raised my voice, I'd become unstable. If I argued, they'd write it down as aggression, the same way they'd already written me down as a thief. Marla slid a second page toward me. You are being placed on administrative leave pending termination, effective immediately. I read the sentence twice because the words were trying to rearrange my life while pretending to be normal. Pending termination, I repeated. Yes, she said. Security will escort you to collect your belongings. I sat back slowly, letting the silence stretch, not because I didn't know what to say, because I needed to memorize the room, the faces, the tone, the exact way they avoided anything that sounded like evidence. Then I asked one question, the only one that mattered. Are you accusing me? I said, or are you looking for someone to blame? Marla didn't answer, but it didn't matter, because I already knew the truth. Somebody had a problem, a missing number, a messy audit trail, a budget line that didn't add up. And they picked the easiest person to throw under it, the guy with no title, no politics, and a reputation built on being agreeable. They thought I would walk out with the box and disappear. They didn't know how I worked. I didn't fight with emotion. I fought with documentation. And that was just the beginning. I got walked out like I'd been caught stuffing cash into my backpack. Not fired yet. Not convicted. Just escorted. Quietly, efficiently, so the rumor could arrive before I did. The box they gave me was laughable. A stapler, a framed photo, a cheap notebook full of training notes I'd written by hand because the vendor's slides were useless. A coffee mug with our division logo. Stuff that said employee, not thief. As we passed the bullpen, I kept my eyes forward. I refused to give anyone a scene to replay later, but I felt it. People watching without looking. The sudden hush that spreads when HR has already primed the room. By the time the security guard badged me out, my building access was dead. My accounts would be next. When I got to my car, the first thing I did wasn't call my wife or my best friend, or anyone who could talk me off a ledge. I opened my personal email and started building a timeline. Because if you want to survive a corporate accusation, you don't argue feelings. You argue facts. Training started 6 weeks earlier, right after corporate signed the rollout schedule. Northbridge was switching warehouse management software and rolling out a new expense platform at the same time. Two high-risk changes stacked because leadership thought efficiency was a magic trick. The vendor asked for super users, people who could train everyone else and troubleshoot live when the floor panicked. Evan chose me because I was reliable and quiet and stupid enough, at the time, to treat extra responsibility like an honor. 120 hours. That was my total, and I could prove it. I had calendar invites for every session, sign-in sheets, chat transcripts from remote trainings, and the training portal log showing my completion status for every module. I had after-hours badge logs, too, because I was in the building when everyone else was home pretending they didn't see the schedule. And then there was the incentive pool. Corporate-funded small completion awards to keep people engaged. Not big enough to change anyone's life, just enough to feel like a pat on the head. Coffee cards, gas cards, small-value gift cards. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't even Evan's originally. It came from the program manager upstairs, someone who lived and died by engagement metrics. But Evan took ownership of it the way he took ownership of everything, by handing the work to me and keeping the credit. And 2 weeks into training, he stood behind my chair while I was updating the roster and said, "We're getting buried in approvals. I don't want finance slowing this down." He tapped the screen like it was his. "Go buy the completion cards and expense them," he said. "Use your corporate card or your account. Whatever is fastest. People need them immediately after the final session." I remember hesitating because even then it felt sloppy. "Shouldn't procurement handle gift cards?" I asked. Evan gave me that half-laugh he used when he wanted you to feel naive. "If we wait on procurement, we miss the rollout. Just do it. I'll approve it." And here's the part that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it. He said it like he was doing me a favor. "You're saving the rollout," he told me. "I see that. I didn't do it because I wanted gift cards in my name. I did it because I had 30 supervisors staring at me every day asking, 'Is this going to work?' And the only honest answer was, 'It will if I keep moving.' So I did the purchases the way Evan told me, through the expense platform under my credentials. And I documented everything, not because I was suspicious, because I'm the kind of person who gets blamed when something breaks. And I learned early that the only shield is a paper trail. That afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table, I pulled up my backups and started collecting what I could before the company tried to erase it. I had screenshots of Evan's messages. I had emails confirming the incentive plan. I had the distribution rosters, names, signatures, dates, and then I found the thing that made my stomach go completely still. An email from Evan sent 2 weeks before graduation day. "Hey Mike," it said, "grab the completion cards on your account so it doesn't slow approvals. You're saving the rollout." There it was, the instruction, the ownership, the chain of responsibility. If this accusation were real, that email would have been Exhibit 1 for my defense, unless someone had already decided it wasn't a defense. Unless someone had already decided the whole point was to make sure nobody looked at Evan. And then, like my brain was finally willing to say it out loud, the thought landed in my chest. They didn't pick me because the evidence pointed at me. They picked me because the evidence pointed away from someone else. I stared at the email, reread it 3 times, and started thinking like a person who had nothing left to protect but the truth. Because if Evan was willing to frame me for $5,000, he wasn't doing it to be petty. He was doing it because there was a bigger number behind it. And that decision, using me as the cover, was about to cost them everything. The next morning, I did the thing most people don't do when they get accused. I stopped talking. No begging texts. No, "Can we meet and clear this up?" No calls to coworkers fishing for sympathy that could be screenshotted and twisted into admission. I treated it like an incident response. Step 1, secure what you can still access. Step 2, freeze the evidence. Step 3, move the problem into a form where people can't lie comfortably. By 10 o'clock, my Northbridge email was locked. My training portal access was revoked. Even the shared drive links I'd built the rollout on started returning errors like I'd never existed. But I'd expected that. I'd been the one who built half the access maps for operations. I knew how quickly a company can erase your footprint when it wants a clean narrative. What they didn't know was how I worked. Every major training session, I'd emailed myself a recap. Nothing dramatic, just bullet points. Who attended, who completed, who needed follow-up, what incentives were distributed. I did it because managers always asked later, "Do you remember who was there?" And I hated relying on memory. Those recaps were now my lifeline. I created a folder in my personal drive and dropped everything in. Screenshots, roster, Evan's email, calendar logs, even photos from the room where you could see gift cards on the table in front of people signing. Then I requested my personnel file in writing, sent certified. I requested the written policy they claimed I violated. I requested a copy of the investigative findings that justified the theft accusation. I kept the language polite, professional, unemotional, because emotional emails get treated like instability. Professional emails get treated like evidence. That afternoon, HR replied with one sentence: "We are reviewing your request. No policy, no proof, no denial, just delay." So I took the next step. I called an employment attorney. Rachel Kim's office was small and plain, the kind of place that looks unimpressive until you realize unimpressive is the point. She didn't decorate with trophies. She decorated with calm. I told her everything: training hours, incentive purchases, the walkout, the phone seizure, the paper that called me a thief. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question: "Do you have written instruction from your director to make those purchases?" I slid my laptop toward her and pulled up Evan's email. She read it once. then again slower. Her expression didn't change, but something in the room did, like the air got heavier. "Good," she said. "Now we can control the story." She explained it in a way that made my stomach unclench for the first time since HR's conference room. Northbridge had accused me of theft without giving me a chance to respond. They seized my personal device without clear policy justification. They publicly escorted me out, which spreads reputational harm even if they never say the word theft out loud. And if they were using me to cover leadership misconduct, the company was about to panic. Because panic is what happens when you force a corporation to choose between admitting a mistake and doubling down on a lie. Rachel drafted a preservation letter the same day. It demanded they retain expense system audit logs for every transaction on that sheet, approval history, including who reviewed and who changed any classification, badge access logs for training rooms and the gift card storage cabinet, security camera footage from the day incentives were distributed, all messages between me, Evan, HR, and finance related to training spend, any internal investigation notes and communications. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Destroy evidence now, and you turn a messy HR incident into a legal crisis. Rachel also filed a wage claim for the training hours. 120 hours of off-the-clock work isn't a favor, it's labor. Then she sent a demand letter that was short and sharp. Either provide evidence supporting the theft allegation, or correct the record and separate me without misconduct. If they refused, we would pursue defamation and wrongful termination. We hit send. And then something happened that I didn't expect. The silence changed. The first 2 days after I was walked out, my phone had been dead quiet. No coworkers, no managers, no one wanting to be involved. After Rachel's letters, the calls started. Not to Rachel, to me. A blocked number, a voicemail from someone in management I barely knew. "Michael, let's talk. We can resolve this." Another voicemail, slightly sharper. "You don't want to make a mistake here." Then late that night, Evan called from his personal number. His voice sounded careful, like he was reading from a script someone else wrote. But he hated the lines. "Mike," he said, "this is getting out of hand." I didn't answer him. I just listened, because people reveal more when you let them fill silence. He kept going. "I tried to protect you. HR overreacted. Loss prevention is, you know how they are, just stop pushing this. It's not good for anyone." Not good for anyone. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't say, "I know you didn't do it." He said what people say when they're scared, the truth is going to be expensive. I texted him one line, "Communicate through counsel." 10 minutes later, Rachel emailed me. They requested a call tomorrow, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because the next morning, the email didn't come from HR. It came from internal audit. They wanted to interview me. When a company's audit team gets involved, it means HR lost control of the narrative. It means someone higher up saw the risk and said, "Stop the bleeding." I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. For the first time, I felt something other than anger. Clarity. Because in corporate life, HR can call you a thief. Managers can throw you under a bus. But audit doesn't care about feelings. Audit cares about logs. And I realized I'd been saving people who never wanted saving. They wanted a scapegoat. I was about to become a witness. Internal audit didn't meet me in a glass conference room with HR smiling like a hostage negotiator. They met me on a video call with cameras on, names visible, and a tone that said, "We're not here to comfort anyone." 2 auditors, 1 note-taker, no small talk. The lead auditor introduced himself as Daniel. He didn't ask how I was doing. He asked for dates. "Walk us through the incentive process," he said, "from approval to purchase to distribution." So I did. I kept it clean and chronological. Exactly how you speak when you want your words to survive a transcript. I explained the rollout pressure, the training schedule, the completion awards. I told them Evan instructed me to purchase the cards through my expense account. because procurement was slow and finance was dragging. Daniel asked, "Who approved the expense submissions?" "Evan did," I said. "He was my direct manager and the project sponsor for our site." "Did anyone else review them?" "Finance flagged one early batch," I said, "and Evan told me to recode it as training materials, because gift cards triggered extra review." Daniel's pen paused. "He told you to recode it?" "Yes," I said. "He said it would slow the rollout if we waited." Daniel didn't react. He just moved to the next question. "Do you have documentation for distribution?" I shared my screen and showed them the roster sheets, names, signatures, dates. I showed photos from the final session where the gift cards were visible on the table in front of people signing. I showed my email recaps to myself that listed recipients. Then I showed Evan's email. Daniel read it silently. Then he asked, "Did Evan have access to your workstation?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "During training weeks, he sat at my desk constantly. He said it was easier to check progress there. And we ran live sessions, so I'd step away to help people." "Did you share your password?" "No," I said. "But my system stayed logged in. We were moving fast." Daniel nodded once, like a door finally opened in his head. He asked a few more questions. Who held the gift cards before sessions? Where they were stored? Whether the vendor ever handled the incentives directly? I answered everything calmly. No exaggeration, no guessing. If I didn't know something, I said I didn't know. Because guessing is how stories get dismissed. When we finished, Daniel said, "Do not contact anyone at the company regarding this matter. If anyone contacts you, inform your counsel." Then he ended the call. No reassurance, no promise, just procedure. But I could feel it. Something had shifted inside Northbridge. Because 2 days later, HR stopped calling. The resolve this like professionals' voicemails stopped. Even Evan went quiet. That kind of silence doesn't mean they won. It means they're deciding who takes the fall. A week passed, then another. And that's when my former coworker, Jenna, texted me from her personal phone. One line. "Evan's been out. Audits camped in finance. People are deleting emails and pretending it's normal." I read it twice. Deleting emails during an audit is like lighting a match next to a gas leak. It doesn't hide anything. It just proves you knew there was something to hide. I forwarded Jenna's message to Rachel. Rachel replied with one sentence. "Good. Let them panic." 3 days after that, Rachel got an email invitation to a resolution meeting with Northbridge Legal. Not HR. Legal. That was my first micro-catharsis, the kind that hits quietly but lands deep. Because HR accuses you, legal calculates you. If legal is in the room, it means someone finally ran the numbers and realized the lie was more expensive than the truth. We went in on a Thursday morning, same building that had walked me out like a criminal. Same badge doors I couldn't open anymore. But this time I wasn't carrying a box. I was carrying a folder. We were escorted to a larger conference room. 4 people sat on the other side of the table. A corporate attorney I'd never met, Marla from HR, suddenly smaller in her chair, a finance manager with tired eyes, and a man in a suit who introduced himself as compliance liaison, which is what companies call someone when they don't want to admit the word investigation. The corporate attorney started talking immediately. "We appreciate you coming in. We want to resolve this matter amicably." Rachel didn't smile. "Start with the accusation," she said. "Are you maintaining that my client stole funds?" The attorney's throat tightened slightly. "We are not prepared to discuss internal findings," he said. "However, we acknowledge that there were process issues in how incentives were handled." Process issues. Not theft, not misconduct. Process. Rachel leaned forward, then put that in writing, clear as record. The finance manager finally spoke, voice low. "The problem is the approvals," she said. "They don't match the submissions." Rachel's eyes stayed on the attorney. "Because someone changed them," she said, not asking. The attorney didn't deny it. He just said, We are reviewing conduct involving multiple parties. That was their version of a confession. They weren't investigating me anymore. They were investigating the story they built around me. The compliance liaison cleared his throat. Mr. Reed is no longer overseeing the program. I watched Marla's hands tighten around her pen. No longer overseeing, I repeated, so he's been removed. Nobody answered, but nobody needed to. Then Rachel opened our folder and slid out 3 documents like she was placing weights on a scale. My training log, 120 hours with timestamps and session proof. The distribution rosters and photos. Evan's email instructing me to purchase incentives under my account. Rachel spoke in the same calm tone she'd used from the beginning. You accused him of theft without evidence, she said. You seized his phone. You walked him out. You created reputational harm. If you don't correct the record, we proceed. The attorney stared at the paper. The room felt tighter. Then he said the sentence that told me the chaos had finally turned against the people who caused it. We are prepared to reclassify the separation as non-disciplinary. That was my second micro-catharsis, because non-disciplinary means they were backing away from calling me a thief. Rachel didn't let them breathe. In writing, she said, with a correction placed in his personnel file. A neutral reference letter, compensation for unpaid training hours, and an additional settlement for damages. The attorney started to negotiate. Rachel cut him off with one line. You don't get to negotiate the price of a lie you created. For the first time since I walked into HR's conference room, I watched Marla's face change. Not guilt, fear. Because HR can push a narrative when the target stays quiet. HR loses power the moment the target brings receipts to the people who control risk. The attorney asked for a break. They left the room for 10 minutes. When they came back, the finance manager wouldn't look at me, and the attorney's voice was softer. We can meet those terms, he said, with standard confidentiality. Rachel nodded once. Fine, as long as the correction is explicit and the separation is clean. He agreed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just sat there, breathing steadily, because I knew something bigger was still happening behind their polite words. They weren't paying me to make this go away. They were paying me because audit had already found where the real money went. And the person who tried to pin $5,000 on me was about to learn what corporate karma looks like when it's backed by logs. I signed the agreement on a Monday morning in Rachel's office, with my hands completely steady. That surprised me. 2 weeks earlier, my phone had been taken out of my hand like I was dangerous. My badge had been shut off like I was disposable. My name had been dropped into a rumor pipeline that never asks permission before it ruins you. Now I was initialing pages while an attorney watched the company's legal language try to pretend this had been a process breakdown. Rachel pointed to the 2 lines that mattered most. A written correction placed in my personnel file stating the theft allegation was unsubstantiated. A neutral separation classification, non-disciplinary, with a scripted reference confirming my role and dates, no mention of misconduct. Then the money part, unpaid training wages for 120 hours, plus an additional settlement for reputational harm. It wasn't a lottery win. It wasn't revenge porn. It was what justice looks like in corporate life, a paper trail that forces liars to stop speaking. When I finished signing, Rachel slid me a copy and said, Do not talk about it. Let them live with it. I nodded. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Because for the first time since HR's conference room, my name wasn't trapped in their story anymore. It was on paper. Corrected. That afternoon, Northbridge emailed me my reference letter. It was sterile. Title, dates, no commentary. But the correction letter was attached too, and that one had weight. It was the company admitting, in the only language companies respect, that they had accused me of something they couldn't prove. 3 days later, a package arrived by courier, my phone, returned in a plain padded envelope like an object they didn't want to touch anymore. I turned it on, scrolled through the logs, and saw what I expected. They'd reviewed messages, searched keywords. tried to find anything that could make their accusation feel real. They didn't find it, because it wasn't real. And then on Thursday night, Jenna texted me again. Evan's gone, just that. No emoji, no extra words. Like even typing his name felt risky. I didn't respond right away. I sat on my couch and stared at the message until the room went quiet in my head, because I wanted it to be true for the right reason. Not because they needed a new scapegoat, because he'd earned it. The next day, Jenna called me. They walked him out, she said. Same way they did you. Security, box, no announcement, just gone. Why? I asked, even though I already knew. Jenna exhaled. Audit found more than the gift cards. The $5,000 was nothing. It was like a doorway. She told me what she'd heard, and it fit too perfectly to be coincidence. Evan had been recoding expenses for months. Small things at first, then larger. Vendor dinners billed as training materials. Duplicate reimbursements pushed through under other people's names. Incentive spending that never reached trainees. Approvals that didn't match submissions because someone was altering categories after the fact to dodge controls. And the reason he chose me for the gift card purchases was the same reason he chose me for training lead. I was competent enough to execute and quiet enough to blame. Internal audit didn't just find the pattern, they traced the access. Apparently, the expense platform kept detailed audit trails. Who edited what, from which device, at what time. The kind of logs most managers forget exist because they assume nobody will ever look. Audit looked. They saw changes made from Evan's laptop. They saw edits made during hours Evan claimed he was in meetings. They saw approvals pushed through in clusters that didn't align with policy. And then they saw the part that made my skin tighten, even sitting safely at home. Some of the edits had been made from my workstation. Not because I did it, because Evan sat at my desk during training weeks, checking progress, while my system stayed logged in running live sessions. He used my proximity like an alibi. He wanted my credentials on the purchases, my device footprint near the edits, my name attached to the cleanest, smallest number. 5,000. A number that could be explained away as one employee's lapse instead of one director's pattern. He thought he'd built a perfect container. He didn't account for one thing. Audit trails don't care who you are. They care what happened. And once audit had enough, Northbridge did what corporations always do when they realize the risk is climbing faster than their pride. They cut the person who created the risk. Evan was terminated for cause. Brandon, the supervisor who'd suddenly gone nervous, resigned effective immediately the same week. Jenna said he'd been pulled into interviews and came out white-faced, carrying his laptop like it was evidence. Northbridge didn't send out a company-wide email explaining any of it. They didn't correct the rumor publicly. That would require admitting they'd let HR accuse an innocent employee as a strategy. But inside the building, the story changed anyway. People talk. People connect dots. People notice who disappears. The whisper stopped being, Mike stole money. It became, leadership tried to pin it on Mike and audit caught them. That was the quiet kind of satisfaction. Real, not performative. The last piece of closure came from a place I didn't expect. The vendor who trained us, same one whose modules I'd basically rewritten, reached out to me a week after the settlement. Not HR, not a recruiter blasting a template. The actual implementation manager, a guy named Luis, who'd watched me run sessions and fix problems in real time. Hey, Michael, he said on the call. I heard you're no longer with Northbridge. I'm sorry. I don't know the details, and I'm not asking. But I do know you carried that rollout. If you want work, I have a spot. I asked what kind of spot. Customer implementation support, he said. You'd be helping sites like yours not crash during Go Live. You already do the job. We just pay for it. The offer came 2 days later, higher salary, cleaner structure, a manager who didn't worship visibility and actually respected competence. When I accepted, I didn't feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was stepping into a version of my life that didn't require me to be naive. On my first day at the new job, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. Same habit, same discipline. But now, when I documented my work, it didn't feel like armor. It felt like pride. And sometimes, late at night, I think back to that HR conference room, Marla's folded hands, the single sheet of paper, the calm way they said I stole $5,000. I remember how small the number sounded, how quickly it could have worked, how easy it would have been for me to panic, lash out, or disappear. But I didn't. Because the truth is, corporations don't fear anger. They fear clarity. They fear timelines. They fear receipts. They tried to turn me into a thief so they could protect a director. Instead, they handed audit the map. And in the end, I didn't get revenge by screaming. I got it by staying exact, by refusing to carry their story out of the building in a cardboard box. Now, if anyone ever asks why I left Northbridge, I don't explain. I don't rant. I don't relive it. I just say, it stopped being a place where facts mattered, and I keep my voice calm because the ending is finished. My name is clean. The right people fell, and the only thing I stole from that company was my future back.